Let me tell you a story about a man named Melvin Carter. He's a good man, steady job, quiet personality. The kind of person who tries his best even when he knows the odds aren't in his favor. One day, Melvin decided he wanted to ask out a young woman named Melanie Whitmore. A woman who, by every social standard, lived in a completely different world than he did. Before Melvin sent the letter, he mentioned his idea to a close friend, someone who has never been known for sugarcoating anything. His friend said very plainly that Melanie was far beyond Melvin's social reach. He told him she was accustomed to luxury, high-profile events, and a lifestyle Melvin had never experienced. Melvin listened, nodded, and simply said, "I know she's out of my league, but it doesn't hurt to ask, right?" Melvin owned a small collection of classic cars, the kind people admire because they remind them of simpler times. He had a classic El Camino, a restored 1970s Volkswagen Beetle, and an old Ford F-100 that still carried the faint smell of gasoline no matter how many times he tried to fix it. He mentioned all three in his letter, offering Melanie her choice. He even joked that the El Camino was his favorite because it could carry everything they needed for a picnic. Melvin wrote Melanie a handwritten letter, something rare in a world full of text messages and quick replies. He sent it to her workplace along with an artificial flower. In the letter, he explained that his sister is passionate about environmental preservation and once told him that cut flowers are death disguised as beauty. Ever since then, he chose artificial flowers instead. He apologized if it seemed unusual, but he hoped she would appreciate the thought and the fact that the flower would last. When Melanie received the letter, her colleague noticed the artificial flower and reacted with immediate judgment. The colleague questioned the gesture, questioned the sender, and questioned whether Melanie should even consider responding. But Melanie didn't share that perspective. She admired the handwriting, she appreciated the sincerity, and she found the explanation about the flower unexpectedly thoughtful. As she read his words, Melanie's thoughts drifted. She had grown tired of the luxury guys who fell at her feet with grand gestures that always felt scripted and hollow. Yachts, premieres, and empty compliments that lasted only as long as the evening. However, Melvin's letter was different. It came from a humble place, sincere and unpretentious. That alone got her attention. Plus, she recognized the names of those classic cars. Her brothers were serious collectors who talked endlessly about El Caminos, old Beetles and Ford F-100s, the exact kind of vehicles Melvin owned and clearly cherished. She smiled to herself, thinking how her brothers would react if they knew. Melanie sat at her desk, read the letter twice, and then reached for a pen. She said she wanted to respond the same way he reached out, with intention, with care, and with something personal. And that is where the story truly begins. Dear Melanie, I hope this letter finds you well. I know you are probably used to a very different lifestyle than mine. You may be accustomed to riding in those large, fancy cars and limos and attending Gail, I mean gala events with well-known people. You may travel on those beautiful boats that look like houses on the water, and you probably visit the nicest restaurants and the most impressive movie theaters. I cannot offer anything like that. But I can offer the closest version of it that I know. I have a few classic cars, a classic El Camino, a fully restored 1970s Volkswagen Beetle, and an old Ford truck. You know, the kind Lamont Sanford drove on that TV show. They are simple, but they are clean, and they have history. If you would like, you can choose which one we take. I cannot take you on a fancy cruise ship, but I can take you fishing at the creek. It is peaceful there, and I would be honored to show you. I cannot take you to a 6-star restaurant. I am not even sure if that exists. But I can prepare a picnic with fresh fruit I picked from the trees in my backyard, nuts, and a salad made from produce grown on my family's farm, all organic. And I can bring peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Or, if you're used to the fancy stuff, Mama made us a jar of fresh peach and strawberry preserves. It is simple, but it is sincere. I cannot offer a movie premiere, but I can offer a walk through the park where you can see joggers, dog walkers, and the occasional unexpected moment that feels like its own kind of entertainment. And I should mention, I do know one person who has been on television. My cousin appeared on an episode of Cops years ago. He has turned his life around since then. And if you would like to meet him, he would be happy to say hello. As far as my family is concerned, he is our celebrity. I also live in a very old home that was built in the late 1800s. It is on the historic house registry. And every year people pay me to rent it for Halloween because of its architecture and atmosphere. If you would like, I would be honored to give you a tour. I know I am not part of your world, but I wanted to ask anyway. Melvin.
Melanie Whitmore worked in a high-end corporate office, the kind with glass walls, designer furniture, and co-workers who treated luxury as a normal part of life. On a quiet afternoon, a delivery carrier stepped inside and walked directly to Melanie's desk. He handed her a single artificial rose in a handwritten envelope. Her co-workers immediately gathered around, curious and judgmental in equal measure. They glanced at the artificial rose with raised eyebrows, whispering to each other as if the flower itself were an insult. Melanie, however, smiled softly as she accepted it. She opened the envelope and began reading Melvin's letter. Her expression warmed, and her co-workers noticed. One of them leaned in and asked, "What is that? Who sent you that?" Melanie answered calmly, "It's from a man I met at the car dealership. He worked on my car. He's very kind." That was all her co-workers needed to hear. Her co-workers reacted immediately. An artificial rose, he couldn't even get you a real one. You're not seriously considering going out on a boat with someone who fishes, are you? Fish smell terrible. You're not getting into one of those old prehistoric cars, right? You ride in luxury vehicles. This is a completely different world. What does he even do for a living? Are you sure this is appropriate? Melanie stayed composed. She said, "He's a nice man. He fixed my car. He was respectful. He wrote a thoughtful letter." Her co-workers pressed further. What does he look like? Is he tall? Is he handsome? Melanie replied, I'm not sure what your definition is, but he is a clean-cut man. He's stocky. He has a slightly receding hairline, but he carries himself well. Before she could finish, her co-workers exchanged looks and gave a collective thumbs down. Melanie ignored them. She reached into her drawer, pulled out her business stationery, and began typing a response to Melvin, calm, thoughtful, and sincere. 2 or 3 days later, Melvin walked to his mailbox with quiet hope. He opened it and began sorting through the usual stack. A bill, another bill, a subscription club he didn't remember signing up for, a letter from his mother. And then he saw it. A white envelope with Melanie Whitmore's name in the return corner. He froze. He dropped everything he was holding right there beside the mailbox. He tore the envelope open with shaking hands and read the first line, I would love to go. I accept your invitation. That was all she wrote. Melvin stood there in the driveway, stunned, breathless, and overwhelmed. From that moment on, Melvin spent every spare minute preparing for the date. He took all 3 of his classic cars, the El Camino, the Volkswagen Beetle, and the old Ford truck, to the car wash on separate days, making sure each one was spotless. While polishing the El Camino, he practiced out loud the words he hoped to say to her. I know this isn't fancy, but I hope you like it. And the creek is peaceful this time of year. I think you'll enjoy it. He rehearsed them again and again under his breath as soap suds ran down the fenders, imagining her smile. He went to his barber for a fresh haircut, holding her letter in his hand while he explained why this one mattered as the clippers buzzed. He quietly practiced more lines. Thank you for coming today, and I really appreciate you giving this a chance. The barber chuckled, but Melvin didn't mind. He wanted every word to come from the heart. He picked up his favorite fishing pole from the repair shop, making sure it was in perfect condition because he planned to let Melanie use it. He stopped by the bait shop for artificial bait.
He went to the grocery store and took his time, wanting everything to be just right. He picked up a big yellow bag of Lay's classic potato chips, the kind everybody's parents kept in the pantry during cookouts, and a can of Planters mixed nuts, the old school blue tin with the metal lid that popped when you opened it. He added a pack of Fig Newtons because in his mind they were the grown folk cookies, the ones you only ate when you were mature enough to appreciate them. He walked over to the bread aisle and reached for a loaf of Wonder Bread, the same soft white bread he'd eaten his whole life. But then he paused. This wasn't just any picnic. This was Melanie. So he put the Wonder Bread back and decided to step it up a notch. He grabbed a loaf of Pepperidge Farm Italian bread, the kind that made him feel like he was splurging. Even though it was only a couple dollars more, in his mind that was fancy. Then he headed to the drink aisle at first. He reached for the usual, the off-brand sodas on the bottom shelf, the kind with names like Dr. Thunder, Mr. Pibb, and Cola Plus. The ones he normally bought because they were 3 for $1. But then he stopped. This wasn't just any picnic. This was Melanie.
So he straightened up, closed the cooler door, and reached for the real stuff. A couple of cold bottles of Dr. Pepper and a glass bottle of Coca-Cola. The kind with the old school logo that made him feel like he was splurging. In his mind, that was first class. And then, for good measure, he grabbed a roll of certs, the breath mints everybody's uncles used to keep in their shirt pockets. You know, just in case. And before he reached the register, he made one last stop in the toiletries aisle. He stood in front of the soap section, staring at the shelves normally. He grabbed the Equate bar, the one in the blue and white box that said compare to dial. It worked fine. It got the job done. But this wasn't a regular day. This was Melanie. So he slid the Equate bar back into its place and reached for the real stuff. A bar of Irish Spring, the original kind, the one that snapped you awake with that sharp green scent. He held it in his hand for a moment, nodded to himself, and thought, yeah, this is the good soap. When he got to the checkout line, he glanced around at all the little last-minute items. Gum, batteries, lighters, and those old-school Little Trees air fresheners hanging on a plastic strip. He normally didn't buy those. He usually stuck with the off-brand fresheners that came in a 5-pack for $1. But this was different. This was Melanie. So he reached up and grabbed a single Little Trees air freshener, the new car scent one. Because in his mind, that was the classy one. He held it for a second, nodded to himself, and thought, yeah, this'll make the El Camino smell real nice.
He contacted his cousin, the one who had appeared on Cops. To make sure it was all right for them to stop by, his cousin agreed. He hired a neighborhood teenager to mow the lawn, rake the leaves, and tidy the yard. He had a cleaning service come through the house to vacuum dust and prepare the historic home he mentioned. The one built in the late 1800s, listed on the historic registry and rented out every Halloween because of its unique architecture. Melvin wasn't trying to impress her with wealth. He was preparing with sincerity, respect, and genuine effort. He took the huge patchwork comforter blanket to the laundromat so he and Melanie would have it to sit on during the picnic. And that is what made him unforgettable. Melvin arrived at Melanie's workplace right on time. He had chosen the El Camino for the occasion, freshly washed, polished, and smelling faintly of the air freshener he had picked out just for her. Melanie's brothers were collectors of classic cars, and if they had seen Melvin's collection, the El Camino, the 1970s Volkswagen Beetle, and the old Ford F-100, they would have been envious. These were the kinds of cars they talked about, restored, and admired. Melanie recognized that immediately. She stepped outside, saw the El Camino, and smiled with genuine appreciation. Melvin stepped out, walked around, and opened the passenger door for her like a gentleman. She entered gracefully, and he closed the door before walking around to the driver's side. Melvin drove her to a scenic ridge. Not a mountain, but a high, open area overlooking trees and sky. It was peaceful, quiet, and full of fresh air. He took out the freshly washed blanket from the laundromat. It still carried the soft scent of downy April fresh. He shook it out carefully and spread it across the grass. He had packed a large picnic basket with fruit, nuts, peanut butter, jelly, fresh bread. He also brought a stadium chair, the kind with a backrest, and offered it to Melanie so she could sit comfortably. He sat on the blanket without one, making sure she had the better seat. They talked easily. Melanie leaned back, relaxed, and genuinely enjoyed herself. They watched. A man walking a large dog, two squirrels chasing each other, a butterfly landing on a flower, a jogger waving as he passed, a couple arguing quietly, a child trying to fly a kite that kept falling. Melanie laughed softly and said, "This is like watching a lurid nature show."
After the picnic, Melvin took her to the creek. His version of a luxury boat ride. He gave her a pair of waders, rubber pants with suspenders, so she wouldn't get her clothes dirty. She put them on, amused and curious. They stepped into his small rowboat. He rowed them out to the center of the water where the fish were active. He handed her his favorite fishing pole, the one he had repaired just for her. He used artificial bait, explaining, "Real bait can harm the fish. This kind is safer, it tricks them just enough to catch them, but we always release them." When she caught her first fish, she gasped with excitement. Melvin gently unhooked it, let her hold it for a moment, and then released it back into the water. Melanie said, "I never knew fishing could be this peaceful." Next, Melvin took her to his home, the one built in the late 1800s, listed on the historic registry, and rented out every Halloween because of its unique architecture. Melanie stepped inside and froze in awe. She admired the original oak wood floors, the hand-carved banisters, the vintage light fixtures, the old-fashioned door frames, the antique molding, the arched windows, the creaking but beautiful staircase, the glass doorknobs, the heavy, faceted kind that caught the light like crystal, the skeleton key locks still built into the doors, the cast iron floor grates with ornate patterns, the tall baseboards and thick window trim you can't buy in stores anymore. The original push-button light switches, the kind you only find in antique shops now. Melvin explained, "The only things I updated were the wiring and the plumbing. Everything else is original." Melanie touched the wood gently and whispered, "This is like walking into a museum." They spent nearly an hour exploring the house, room by room. Their final stop was to visit Melvin's cousin, the one who had appeared on Cops years ago. Melanie met him, his wife, and their children. She listened to his story about turning his life around and working in community outreach. She admired his honesty and resilience. Melvin was proud. To him, this was a meaningful moment. Melvin drove her back to her workplace so she could pick up her car. He walked her to the door, thanked her for the day, and wished her a safe drive home. She smiled warmly before leaving.
The next morning, Melanie walked into her office glowing. Her coworkers immediately surrounded her. "So, how was it? Was it terrible? Was he boring? Was it awkward?" Melanie set her purse down, looked at them calmly, and said, "Are you kidding me?" Her coworkers blinked. Melanie continued, "The first thing we did was go to a park. I never do that. We sat on a blanket and watched squirrels, butterflies, dogs, joggers, real life. It was more entertaining than any movie I've been to."
Her coworkers stared, confused. "And the fishing?" one asked. Melanie smiled. "It was beautiful. I held a fish for the first time. We released it back into the water. It was peaceful. It felt honest." Another coworker asked, "What about his old house?" Melanie's eyes lit up. "That house is a treasure, built in the 1800s, preserved, loved. It's on the historic registry. It's one of the most beautiful homes I've ever seen." Another asked, "What about his ex-convict cousin?" Melanie answered, "He turned his life around. He helps people now. Listening to his story was very fascinating." Finally, the bougie friend said, "But what about the artificial rose?" Melanie held the rose gently and said, "He explained that his sister taught him cutting flowers is like cutting something alive. He gave me this because it lasts, because it's thoughtful, because it means something." Another coworker asked, "And what about those old, outdated cars he drives?" Melanie answered, "Oh, you mean his classic car collection? Let me tell you something. My brothers would be envious if they saw Melvin's cars. Those cars are priceless. They're rare. They're beautiful. I was impressed." She paused, then said, "Of all the dates I've ever been on, this was the most memorable. And if he asks me out again, I will absolutely consider it." I know I'm out of her league, but it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
And so the moral of the story is simple. Sometimes the world will tell you who you're supposed to be with, but your heart will tell you who you're meant to see. Sometimes the fancy dates don't matter. Sometimes the money doesn't matter. Sometimes the league doesn't matter. What matters is sincerity. What matters is effort. What matters is heart. Melvin didn't have much, but he gave everything he had, and that made all the difference. So if you ever find yourself standing in front of someone you admire, and you're wondering whether you're good